Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Adam.
This is Tim.
And I'm Steve.
We're going to give our hot takes on the board game that we just finished playing, Smartphone Inc.
So, manufacturing smartphones, that's a pretty exciting theme there, huh?
It's right up there with Victorian class systems.
Well, it's funny because it is a unique theme, even if it's not super exciting to me. But I asked a question on Twitter last week about themes, about overused themes in board games. I said there are a lot of overused themes in board games, so it's nice to see variety successfully emerging lately. Obviously, think things like, Wingspan, Calico, they're popular as well. But I said, which of these overused settings is the biggest turnoff for you? Personally, I'd love to see less great mechanisms wasted on pre-industrial European cities. Steffenfeld, that's aimed at you, by the way. But anyway, here were the four options that I gave our Twitter followers. Number 1, ancient Rome. Number 2, pre-industrial Europe. Number 3, space. And number 4, high fantasy worlds, generic fantasy worlds. So those are four that just seem to be like really prevalent in board gaming. They have been for years. Starting to see some different stuff emerge. What about you guys? Before I go into the results here, Steve, are there any of those that you are particularly done with?
I pretty much love them all as long as it's well executed. I don't have any particular theme that I hate. Although, honestly, I know this isn't a market problem, but in our gaming circle, I've played enough Cthulhu games for now. Like, I don't need to play any more Cthulhu games.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, obviously, there's a lot of Lovecraftian games as well. That's funny. Okay, interesting. Adam, what about you?
Yeah, good point, Steve, with the Cthulhu stuff. I know we're hurting Chris's feelings right now, but there's so much Cthulhu stuff out there. It's weird. But I got to go with like Mediterranean, ancient Rome, trading stuff, tan colors. It just seems like I can't think of anything else, so I'm going to throw this Mediterranean birth of European civilization into a board game. It's a big turnoff for me. Again, Steve's right. Some of those games are excellent, but it takes it immediately sets a barrier for me to have to hurdle over to want to play that game.
Yeah, I think that was the point for me too, right? Like, I love some of the mechanisms. Some of my favorite games are set in like medieval Europe. Why can't they be set somewhere else? That'd be way more fun.
Right.
Anyway, here's what our Twitter followers said. Ancient Rome had 27%, pre-industrial Europe 40%, space had 18%, and fantasy had 15%. So most of them are kind of right along with me there. They don't need to play any more games in ancient European cities or medieval European cities. Great to see some new games coming out, but I guess but people are not over fantasy or space at this point. At least our target audience isn't. I would agree with that. To be honest, like, even though they are used a lot, I'd rather play almost any game with a space theme or even a generic fantasy theme than just the ancient European theme. I don't know why that is. I mean, ancient European history is interesting enough, I guess, but it just does feel very dry at this point.
Yep.
Yeah, for me, there's something always captivating about space. I think I said something on the Twitter like, hey, this could actually be happening in some galaxy that's light years away in the past or in the future. Like, maybe something like this is actually going on right now. And then, similar with the fantasy world, like, Lord of the Rings and Hobbit. Those are just cool stories, and it brings you in. Game of Thrones. It's just like, I don't know, people get fascinated by them, so I could see the hook there.
Yeah. All right, well, that's enough about themes that we don't care about. Let's talk about another theme we don't care about that much, with Smartphone Inc. Just kidding there. We'll jump into the rules description right now.
In Smartphone Inc., 1 to 5 players take the role as a telecom company fighting for the largest slice of the global market pie. The game consists of 5 rounds with 8 phases each, with many phases occurring quickly and simultaneously. The first phase is critical. Here, players determine the price of the products, the amount of products to produce, how many resources to dedicate to research, and how many resources to dedicate to expanding their network. This is all done in secret behind a screen, largely because whoever bids for the lowest price will become the first player to act for the remainder of the phases in the round. All of this is determined by manipulating 2 3x2 chunky cardboard planning pads. They come with 4 icons on each side representing upcoming actions. Notice there's 4 icons on each side, but 6 spots, so that's 2 blanks. The 2 pads must overlap between 1 and 4 slots, with each overlap slot producing an additional good. After the planning phase, players reveal their choices, set their market price, which is phase 2, and produce their goods, which is phase 3. Phase 4 involves acquiring a 2x1 improvement block, which can be used to bolster planning pads in future rounds, but only if the factory symbol was left revealed in Phase 1. Next, Phase 6, in turn order, players allocate one resource for every purple sprocket on their planning pads to researching technologies. Once fully researched, these techs give ongoing or one-time benefits. If you're the first to research the technology, you pay one extra, but you get some points. Similarly, in Phase 6, players earn one resource for every blue truck from their planning phase. But these resources are placed on the map in locations adjacent to existing office buildings and represent expanding potential sales locations in new countries or markets. Some markets have limited office space. If everything worked out well, it's time to sell goods in Phase 7. In turn order, which remember was set way back in Phase 1, players sell the goods they produce to buyers in regions where they have an office building. Goods are sold from left to right to eligible buyers who may be only buying phones with a certain technology or phones that are below a certain price. Space is limited in each region, so poor planning may result in unsold goods and leaving points off the board. In Phase 8, players tally their points, which is goods sold times price. Players also earn region dominance bonuses as well. If you sold the most cubes in a region, you get some extra points. After that, remove the cubes, reset starting prices to 5, refresh the factory, and repeat until the end of round 5. There's also an Update 1.1 expansion, which includes a smaller map suggested for 2 to 3 players, which we use in our first of 2 plays today. The expansion also includes some modular content, which we didn't use. Smartphone Inc. is designed by Ivan Lashin with art by Victor Miller-Gausa and is published by Cosmodrome Games.
All right, welcome back. We played 2 games tonight. First 2 games for me, first 2 games for Steve. Adam, you've been playing a little bit just to give you all a little bit of an idea of our experience with the game. Adam, why don't you start? You kind of brought this game in front of us. You're the one that got excited about it. Tell us about your thoughts on the gameplay mechanisms of Smartphone Inc. What's something that stands out to you?
Yeah, so I've been mentioning this in the last few podcasts. The theme, again, was a hurdle for me, but after hearing good talk about it from so many other people, it sparked my interest. So we got it out here, and I think the star of the show, there's kind of 2 mechanism stars of the show. And the first is kind of you have these 2 kind of tablets and you're manipulating those, and that's how you select your actions for the rest of the round. So the kind of manipulating the tablets, adding these other little icons, that involves doing like an auction, kind of logistics, where you're going to go for your route. So that whole, I don't know if you'd call it programming, right up front, kind of secret bidding, that whole thing just stands out to me. That puzzle right there is fantastic. And that's one of the parts that really, really stands out in this game for me.
Yeah, I like I would call it action selection, and it is hidden mainly for the purpose, probably I guess primarily for the purpose of hiding, whether you're bidding for first player, basically the lowest cost phones. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure that the rest of the actions matter that much, but when somebody sees like how many technology actions you're taking and how many logistics actions you're taking, they might have an idea of what your plan is and they could try to get in front of it. So it's pretty interesting. I do like unique action selection mechanisms. I think this does something that's really fascinating, really unique. It's very tough. There are so many things you want to do with these pieces you've got sitting there, but there's really only a few different directions you can get it to. You just optimize. You optimize for whatever action you think is going to benefit you the most that time. And I think that's really fun. I also do like the blind part of it, though. That bid for the first player is so important in this game. First player is hugely impactful. It feels as impactful as Power Grid, but you have more control over it. You're giving up the price on the phones, but if you do it right and everyone else doesn't do the same thing as you are, then you can take advantage of those options that you want to. So that's really cool. Steve, what stood out to you? Any other mechanisms that you thought were pretty cool here?
Those are definitely my 2 favorite mechanisms. The pad is really cool. The tablet, the silent auction is fun too. Even though I was successful in getting first place most of the rounds of both games, I think, I was underbidding compared to what my opponents were bidding. And so I could have made a lot more points and still kept my position if I would have not underbid so much and potentially won.
Yeah, that goes to show you that having that lowest price is pretty important because you get to go first. But if you bid too low, you are hosing yourself out of lots of money. That's why the game is so fun, because lowest price doesn't mean you're going to perform the best the rest of the game.
Yeah.
So if you have a backup plan, if you know you're going to go second or third and you're ready for that, you can up your price and potentially sell a lot of cubes at a higher price, a lot of fun, a lot of product, whatever it is. In this case, it's represented by cubes. It's a game of cat and mouse with your opponents there. What are they going to do? Okay, what am I going to? I think he's going to do this, so I'm going to do this. And then I'll still be able to sell a bunch of stuff at a higher price. Ha ha ha. So that is kind of what you get from that first phase. Yeah, I guess first phase of 8 each round.
The first game we played tonight, we played with the 1.1 expansion, which has basically a smaller 2 to 3 player board. So there's less territories you're going to try to control for. And then the second game we played with the original board, which is much bigger. And I think there was a difference, and it probably was a little bit of a trick in that the first game, first player was so much more important because you really could run out of where you could sell your goods. Second game, it was still important, but you were less likely to run out of spaces to sell your goods because there was more territories to get into. I think that the second game, Steve, even though you were going first more, it was less impactful. You did get some decisions to make first, but you didn't stick us. Like the first game, there was like half a dozen cubes I couldn't even sell in the final round. The second game, I never had that problem. And it mattered some of the technology tiles that came out as well that gave us some new options. That was probably a little bit of why that strategy didn't work for you in the second game.
Yeah, and just to explain the mechanic a little bit more, the main reason it's important to go first is that you get to sell your goods first. And each region has a limited number of buyers. If you're the first seller, you can capitalize on that particular market and create a monopoly, essentially. Even if not a monopoly, you can still sell enough there to become the dominant seller and get the market bonus. So that's a lot of points potentially, not only for you, but for that your opponents cannot get.
This kind of ties into the phase, the round structure. What do you guys think of the ordered phases in each round? Any thoughts on that?
It was pretty smooth and it moved very quickly. Most of the phases were so quick, they didn't require a lot of thought or anything like that. Like one of them was just take the goods that you're owed. So easy, you look at your board and you take the things. I didn't have a problem with it. It went very smooth. I think by the second game, playing two games in a row, I started to kind of get lost. It was just like, after doing that so many times, I'm like, wait, what phase are in? What are we doing right now? So it was a little to keep up with after several games, but that's just like brain burn of playing a couple mid-weight games in a row. But I thought it was super slick. It didn't feel like a lot of upkeep. It didn't feel like a lot to track. It all worked pretty well.
Right. Steve, any thoughts there?
The only thing that was particularly interesting to me about it was that the turn order could change in the middle of the round. Right? Just because you started with the lowest price for phase 1 doesn't mean that you would have the lowest price by phase 3. Because of different technologies and things like that. Your selling price could actually go up or down based on retailer bonuses and technologies. And we weren't, I think that's it. But anyway, so you could actually take the early game or early round first player bonuses and then switch to a higher selling price for the actual selling portion of the round.
That never happened to us, did it?
It once. One of my... Something bumped me up one selling price, and I got an extra couple dollars.
You're talking about the one, there's a technology that will up your price for every something or something that you have out there in your thing.
Something like that.
There was one point where Steve would have gone first, but his price upped back up. So I was able to go first. Yeah. Anyway, I like this, how it's laid out, this kind of structure. Like, okay, there's these 8 phases. Most of them just breeze right by, like you were saying, Tim. And I don't know, it's just something about it that's so organized and slick to me that you cruise right through. And I don't know why it's so appealing, but it is.
The phases in the round went through quickly, but then there's only 5 rounds, and holy cow, did those creep up on me fast. Like, the game ended both games faster than I wanted it to, but probably at the right time because we had pretty much filled up the board and taken most of the spots that we could take. So there wasn't a whole lot more to do, but there was something about the game that just left me feeling just a little bit like, oh, I wanted one more round, which I think is a good thing. It definitely didn't overstay its welcome at all. And it didn't feel like, hey, I really needed to be able to do something else. I mean, it crept up so fast at that final round. I was like, oh crap, I didn't plan for the game to be over this time. And that happened both games. That was pretty cool.
The other superstar for me in this game is when you get to, I guess it's phase 7 of every round when you actually get to put your goods out there. And so in this phase, you're kind of looking around. You're like, okay, I can put my cubes here, and that'll block out Tim. That'll block out Steve. Oh, if I do this, I can get the majority in this region. So you're kind of figuring out how to put your cubes out to hoard the most money and like block this guy out of this region. So that's kind of the other fun, super kind of fun phase to me.
Hated it. No, I didn't hate it. I think it's very clever. It was very frustrating sometimes, though. That was the whole balance, right? Like if I price my goods up higher than everyone else does, or even if I'm in the lead on points, then that final phase, I'm never going to take a choice I want to. So that was rough sometimes, but also really fun when you could be the one that was going first and get in the way of other people. So I think that's the core of the game. Listen, we've talked about a ton of games on here. I like to play the game, and I don't like to get played by the other people around. Like I'd rather get played by the game. And so it's rough to me, like when other people can just be like, who do I want to mess with this turn? Oh, I'm gonna get in Tim's way. It's cool. It's really fun about the game, but also really gets me angry a little bit. So I want to go back to the mechanism that I'm always interested in, engine building. And so this game has a clever little engine building mechanism of, building technologies. If the action selections on your board are the little purple sprockets, then you can basically spend those to add to a technology, which allows you both to kind of sell in spaces in different markets, but also gives you an ongoing benefit. One thing I really liked about it, and one thing I didn't. One thing I liked about it is that if you race to that, then you would get an extra bonus. So it would cost you one more sprocket than the other people after you, which is thematic because, hey, I developed this technology. Now somebody else is going to kind of like ride my coattails and steal it. You know, they're taking this trade secrets from me and reusing it, and it doesn't cost them as much to develop it now. So that was fun. But then you get a big point bonus that you can use at the end of the game. So it was fun to try to rush into that and take advantage of it. The thing that I didn't love about it from an engine building perspective is that there were 6 of those spaces on the board. Basically, all you did is you put your cube on one of those, but then you had to remember the rest of the game that you had that benefit. Both where you could place your cubes, which wasn't as bad because, that's something you can just like think about while you're placing your goods. What markets are you selling to? But it was more about that each of the special abilities might trigger in a different phase. To me, it felt a little bit like several times, I totally forgot to do that in that phase because I had that ability. It's a little different than some engine building games where you kind of put something in front of you or put something that impacts the area that you would be looking at the time of the game. And in this case, it didn't. That was my only failing with it. It wasn't bad. It was only 6 to track. You usually had like 3 to 4 mostly to track. It was a little minor quibble I had about what I generally like in games, engine building. Here, it got to the point where it got like, it was almost frustrating because I didn't remember, that I could do those things.
I feel like the game played you in that case, Tim.
Good point. Touche.
I would say it also makes it hard, even in person, to help your teammates or / opponents make sure they're doing things correctly. Because it's just as complicated for you to try to figure out what they're doing as it is for them to figure out what they're doing.
Yeah.
And there are certain sections, I guess you'd have to read it again, where you're not obligated to tell your teammates / opponents if they miss a bonus that they're supposed to take. Like if they could have sold in a spot and they say they're done, they don't get to sell there. Unless everyone agrees that they can. So, like, I don't know. The rules were kind of, like, wishy-washy on some of that.
Is that supposed to represent your, like, board members and they're not synergizing well and they're not planning well?
I suppose
right?
so, yeah.
That's right.
Not on the same page. I think this is a similar complaint to lots of engine building games, kind of like Terraforming Mars or any game where there's so many combos, Rajas of the Ganges, Dice Charmers. Oh, did I forget to do this thing? I forgot. So I think that comes with familiarity of the game. I know if we're playing Terraforming Mars, I'm so familiar with all the cards and everything. I'd be like, oh, Steve, don't forget this. Tim, don't forget that. I mean, you guys are pretty familiar too. But with any like new player in that game, it's just my familiarity with it is such that, don't forget this. You can do this too. But that's kind of the same thing is going to come with any kind of combo or engine building. So I can see that. And they try to help you out here with having your little building, your little office spaces in front of that technology. You're in front of that little piece of the engine that you're building. And they try to put a little thing in the top left of each technology that reminds you of what round that bonus triggers. So they try to help you out, but yeah, it's a whole different story trying to actually remember to do it.
Yeah, agreed. And it's not terrible, but it's just a little something. Any other gameplay or mechanisms you guys want to mention?
Well, you mentioned engine building. There is a second engine building component of this game. What's the manufacturing factories?
I call it the factory.
Oh yeah, you can add the extra actions you can add to your planning.
Right. So you can modify your 2 base tablets. You start with 1 modifier, and then each round you either get a good generating token or another tablet modifier that can be used for goods if you don't want to modify your tablet in that particular way. And I thought that was really fun, trying to decide each turn, do I want to keep my factory exposed so that I can potentially get a tablet modifier that will help me later rounds? Or do I want to cover that, with either something that will give me a better benefit with one of my modifiers, or just cover it to get a good this turn, and I'll still get the good token. So that was kind of an interesting thing as well. And in the 3-player game, it was really tight. Like if there was a specific token you wanted, you needed to make sure you were first. In the larger game, it didn't matter as much because there were 5 slots to pick from.
Yeah, cool. And that just made that puzzle a little bit rougher too, because then, you can only cover up things on your actual tablets, unless there's one technology that lets you hang them off the side, which I never got a chance to play with. It was always like, oh my God, so I got to cover up, 4 things here. What's the most important thing for me to get this round and keep? But you did get to upgrade, right? Those upgrade tiles really did make a difference. They gave you some extra choices to make. Yeah, very cool. Very fun. All right, so let's jump into the production and theme of Smartphone Inc. I was so not interested in the theme of it when I saw it. When I was going for my MBA in college, one of my final classes in college was I think it was a marketing course, but we had to do a simulation, and our simulation was about selling cell phones to different markets and pricing the cell phones and investing in technologies. It was basically like this game. And I hated that simulation. It was a competitive simulation where the first class, you all kind of privately say what you're going to do. You're going to build technology. You're going to go into this market. And you're going to price it this way. And we rocked it, man. The first 2 weeks, my team just killed the rest of the class. But then the rest of the class realized all they had to do was price their phones way cheaper than ours. And then we couldn't sell any phones after that. And we just totally tanked. Our score tanked on it. Man, that stuck with me, how bad I failed at that simulation by not planning ahead for that. So this brought back a lot of negative memories for me. But that being said, I'm kind of joking here. It does remind me of that.
That's kind of.
But that being said,
that's kind of exactly what happened in the first game that we played. So sorry
yeah,
to stir up those bad memories for you. That's awful.
That's exactly what happened in the first game. Oh my God. So the thing is, though, that I wasn't interested in the theme at all going in. The good news is that the theme is so dull that by the time I got halfway through the first game, there was no theme at all. I was just playing the mechanisms in the game. So, that's fine. It's a lot like these medieval, European city games where I don't care. I'm not building a castle in Tuscany. I'm just grabbing the right tile at the right point and placing it on my board. So that's kind of how the theme was for me. It's so bland that it just wasn't a theme anymore. It was just an abstract game mechanism. Now, what I did find fun in it, just to add one positive on the theme, is that the way that the markets were laid out, it was fun for me to say like, oh, okay, I see. So, the Emirates doesn't want my cheap phones. They don't want my cheap phones, but China will take my cheap phones, right? So they lay the markets out in a way that you can kind of think about the different regions of the world and how they're buying your phones. So it does tell a story there. So I like that, but that was about it. Otherwise, it was really just me playing the mechanisms. What do you guys think of the thematics here?
I didn't mind the theme in concept, but I didn't like how the technologies, the technology type didn't really have a big impact on the technology reward, right? And most of the regions have all 4 or have 4 or more of the technology types, so didn't really do anything. But I really loved the mechanics, so I didn't care.
The theme for me here was a huge turnoff until I started playing the game. And then you have these little technologies. So there's you can research GPS technology. Well, I remember when cell phones didn't have GPS on them. You can research that technology. Now they have GPS on. And then Wi-Fi is one of the technologies. Video games. What? You can play video games on your phone? Well, not back in 1999 you can do that. You could play Snake. So, and then battery, this stuff makes sense to me. Battery charging technology. I remember, batteries used to have this, you get 10 minutes of talk time, and then you had to like plug this thing in, or you have to plug it in all the time. And then you have that, remember for like, I don't know, a while back in 2009, there was that weird in thing that was like cool. Well, that's on here. That's part of this game too. And then this game's getting a little dated. 4G is one of the technologies too. I think we're on the 5G
top
now.
Yeah, the top technology.
Yeah, the top technology is 4G. So, that was the cool thing. So these are all real cell phone technologies. So I get a bit of nostalgia when I'm playing this game. So I remember the development of cell phones back from when they were just a little Nokia brick to what they are now. So the theme kind of works for me here. And then how you spread. Yeah, I guess you could do any kind of number of themes where they spread all over the world. So nothing spectacular there. But I just want to say the theme here isn't as dry as Tim and Steve make it out to be, at least for me.
All right, well, moving on past theme, the production is great. The dual layer main board, where there's slots on the main board for all of the components and everything, I love that. That's fantastic. Every game where you have to put components out on the board should have dual layer on it. I'll pay for it. I don't care. I like the little action planning mechanism where you have these two little tablets and you got to move them around. I mean, that's not really thematic. That's not how you build cell phones. You don't like move two tablets around and try and place them on top of each other. But it's fun that you're playing with components that represent the types of tools that you'd be using, and the way that you use them is great. So the little components, it looks like they're really nice. The little advancement tokens or little graph charts, and the buildings and everything are nice little like resin components. Adam, is that what those are?
Yeah, they're just like terraforming Mars cubes,
like acrylic cubes,
yeah.
Stuff like that. Yeah, I like the components. They're all great. The actual look of the board is kind of funny because go back and listen to our review of Beyond the Sun and how the board has a lot of white space and there's just like kind of an absence of anything going on here. They did the same thing here, but it works here because, I don't know, you're thinking like Apple aesthetic, white with just the icons. For some reason, with this whole theme, it all just works, even though it's fairly empty, fairly plain. From just a look and feel perspective, I think it all works really well.
Yeah, from the minute I pulled this thing out of the box, I was blown away. You got this huge, thick, chunky map. You're like, why is this thing so big? Oh, it's dual layer. There's spots for every single cube I could put in here. The little player trays it comes with are great. They hold the two little tablet things on top, and then underneath there's a slot for your office buildings and for your cubes, and there's a little slide over for the cubes you produce that round. And then there's a little, whatever they're called, like the little stairs, or it looks like kind of like the bars as you're building towards building an office building in a different region or research and techno. So there's slots for everything, and it organized really nice inside the box. The components are fantastic. They went to the extra effort to make different shapes rather than just cubes for everything. I appreciate that they did that. The colors are all vibrant and nice. So just the production here is fantastic for me. Really, really enjoy the production.
Steve, anything to add?
I liked that the board was pretty readable. I think they could have gotten rid of some of the white space by covering up the stupid map of the world that's on every game in the world and made the iconography a little bit bigger. But maybe on the real board it doesn't matter so much. Everything's really easy to see and read, and I liked it.
That kind of brings us around to the user experience, the UX on it. It was great. And one of the things I really appreciate is that everything you needed to know about the board state, the round you're in, that's tracked on the board. The phase of the round that you're in, that's tracked on the board. The bonuses for every space. I didn't have a single problem being my first time playing, understanding or looking at the board and being able to tell what we needed to do. So they did a great job with the user experience here with the user interface. Worked really well.
Agreed. Yeah, it's nice.
Let's talk about our favorite moments of the game tonight. I'll just start with this one. Adam already kind of referenced it. The first game, I felt like I was doing okay. I was like 1 point away from Steve. Adam was a little bit behind us, but it was a fairly tight game. We were like within 10 points the whole first game. And most of the first game, I was getting the discount because I think that's what my Civilization or my particular
cell phone company
did. Yeah, my cell phone company, not my Civilization. But my cell phone company gave me a bonus. One of the tiles that I had let me basically reduce the price on my for my phones. And so I was getting first player most of the first 4 rounds. I think 3 out of the first 4 rounds I got first player. But I wasn't making a lot of money when I was selling phones. I was getting the technology. So I'm like, okay, I'm going into the last round. I don't need to upgrade any technologies. I don't need to buy any factory tiles. So why don't I just raise my price up a lot and sell lots of cell phones in this last round? wow, did I learn how this game actually plays then? Because I raised my price up. Steve and Adam took almost every spot on the board. I was only able to sell 4 cell phones in the last round of the game, and I just got crushed by it. That was fun. I mean, it was a fun learning experience. That's what I love about the discovery of new games, playing a game, getting to know the, kind of the way it works and try to work out the best strategy with what and I clearly didn't plan that well, but it was fun for me to just see how that all came together and how you guys intentionally like built a lot of phones cheap and just put them in all the markets I was trying to sell to. So to me that stood out. I will not forget that moment. Adam, you're probably right. I'll probably have nightmares going back to my old MBA class because of it. So what about you, Steve? Any moments that stood out to you?
Every time we revealed our action choices for the round, it was always fun to see how well you had guessed what you should be selling your price at, because you can't really change it much. Most of the time you can't change it once it's been revealed, and I was regularly underpriced, but it was still fun to see, like, okay, I got closer this time to where I should have been, and to see what the other people decided to go for that time too. Did they want to invest in technology this time? Are they going to expand their distribution network this time? So the reveal was fun. My favorite part of the game.
I'm with you guys. The reveal here is another one of the best parts of the game for me. I kind of knew what was coming on that last. Well, I didn't know what was coming that last round, Tim. I had hoped that you'd priced up high. I knew I had 1 billion cubes. I was just going to underprice a little bit, or that first board that we played on is small enough to where if you had locations, if you had office buildings in all locations, you could totally put cubes in every single locations and block it off for everybody. I could kind of see that coming, and that's what I did. I was like, I felt a little bit bad about it, but the game's pretty savage like that. So that's something I enjoy in games, and that was it was a fun. And then I knew Tim was probably not feeling too good at that, so it hurt to make Tim feel like that, but it also felt a little bit good to make Tim feel like that.
When I was watching how to play on this, the reviewer that was doing the teaching, one of the things they said about that phase, they said it's a little like playing poker. You're kind of like hiding and then revealing it. The problem is that there's no actual bluffing. You don't represent in any way what you're doing. Maybe you could trash talk and be like, oh man, I'm totally gonna go low here. I need to get a spot. I could kind of pretend. But for the mechanisms don't really allow you to kind of represent that you're trying to do something. And I think maybe that's the one thing that was missing a little bit for it, because you're really just guessing. You're really just guessing as to where do I go? How much do I take low here? But anyway, it was still fun regardless.
One other thing, maybe it was mechanics or maybe it's here. What do you think about the variability of the tech tiles and how that changes the game? Did we talk about that?
Is it one? We didn't, and that would normally go under mechanisms, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Was it just one tile with a double-sided tile for each of the technologies? Is that how it plays out?
So the expansion introduces another whole set.
Okay, so there's literally 4 then different technologies you could have.
Exactly, yeah.
I think with that, I would be very happy with that, because I think if you just saw the 2 repeatedly, it would start to get a little tired, because that was a big part of the kind of the planning and what changed the gameplay and made things feel differently. So if you're actually dealing with 4 different technologies that are going to rotate out across all of them, that's a nice amount of variability to kind of make the game feel different every time.
I think every time I played, the techs have been a little bit different, and it's made the game feel totally different. And you get these little cases that pop up. Well, oh gosh, I could put a second building here and then block out this whole zone, and now nobody else can even come to this zone that I'm in. Well, that's freaking awesome. So the stuff that's not like, put in the rule book that emerges during the game that I just find fascinating. This game kind of has that emergent crescendoing play to me, and that's something I really enjoy. So, and then that variability of it too with the technologies is pretty fascinating.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, let's get into our final thoughts, and would love to hear from you guys. Would you request to play this game again? Steve, why don't you start?
I hope Adam brings it to our October Gameathon, or TimCon, if that's the official name for it.
Apparently that's the official name.
Tickets are on sale for TimCon, yeah.
I would totally play this game again, but I probably wouldn't request it in the immediate future, just because there's so many other games to play. But if somebody else asked for it, I would have no problem playing it.
Steve, let me ask you a question. I think you could find this kind of comparative to Power Grid. Economic simulation, a little bit of a market thing going on.
Yeah, routes on a map.
How did this compare for you? Like, did you like this more? Did you like it a lot? Would you pick Power Grid over this if you were going to play again?
What I liked more about this game was the tablet.
The action planning.
Where you got to create your actions for the game. What I didn't like about this game was the variable technologies, honestly. It just makes it hard to have a strategy. Like, you have to adjust your strategy every time based on what the technologies are. And, that's fine. But the nice thing about Power Grid is what the strategy is. It's just about optimizing. Whereas this is a little bit more of a puzzle. So I would pick this one over Power Grid.
Okay. Adam, so what about you?
Yeah, this game, it hits all the right notes for me. I already bought it, so obviously I'm going to want to play it again. It has a light rules overhead. It kind of gets out of the way. It lets you play against the other players rather than trying to figure out the puzzle of a game system. It's streamlined. It's pretty quick. It's pretty snappy. I think the setup is super quick. You just dish out the little player boxes and you set up the game in maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And then we played, 2 games tonight in under 3 hours, roughly about 3 hours. So about 90 minutes per
first place. And I would say this is a 60-minute game easy once everybody knows it.
But I do feel like with the different texts, that's something that Steve wasn't too fond of, was something I really appreciated, is that kind of those texts add to this puzzle. And it's going to be a little bit of a different puzzle every time. You're going to have to figure that out and figure out how that works for this particular game. So yeah, this game hits all the right notes for me. I would definitely request to play it again. How about you, Tim? What do you think?
Well, I'll speak to that one thing first of all, because you guys disagree a little bit on it. I think without the text, this game is going to get stale. I mean, you're obviously playing against the other people and what their pricing is and stuff like that. But I think variability to some extent is really important to me in a game, and that it added enough to make it, to kind of change up the puzzle, give me a different thing to test out and say, hey, what's the most important technology for me to work with? Also, that the technologies and the way they link to the different regions on the board, and that, hey, this is the region I've got access to. Which technology should I like? Should I do it for the benefit that you get, or should I do it for the access to the additional space in that region so I can get majority bonus? So I think the technology is really interesting and definitely a positive compared to something like Power Grid, which is pretty static as far as the gameplay is going to proceed. Would I request to play it again? What did I say about Power Grid? Did I say I would request to play Power Grid again, or did I say...
I don't have my Tim notes on me, so I forget what I said. Yeah.
I think what I said, I want to circle back to that, because I do think I like this more than Power Grid a little bit, even though I liked Power Grid a lot. And Power Grid did some things unique. I don't know. I don't have to compare it to Power Grid. It's just that's a game that we played recently that's reminiscent to me of this. I think it's the same, though. Like, I really liked playing it. I think how quick it plays, how streamlined it is, those are great positives going for it. The action planning was a lot of fun with it. I like action selection mechanisms that are unique, and this one has something that's really cool going on. But I think the general theme, and I think that's what I said about Power Grid too, is that the general theme of it just being basically kind of an economic simulation, this doesn't get me excited. I'll bring up another game that I said this about, a game that I love the mechanisms on, and that was Concordia. Like, Concordia had fantastic mechanisms, but I said I probably wouldn't request to play it again because it was just such a bland theme and idea. I feel the same way about Smartphone Inc. I think the presentation's better here. It's fresher. It's a unique theme, at least. It's not something that's been done over and over again, so I like that about it. But it doesn't get me excited to come back to it. However, Adam would love to play this again anytime. If you request it, I had a great time playing it. I think it's really fun mechanisms to go for. But it's just not a game probably that I'm going to be searching out to play. I think it's just because of the theme. It's probably not just because of the theme. It's also because it's one of these games where you can get in the way and mess with people, which are just not as big of a hit for me as they are for you. No fault of the game at all. It's doing what it's supposed to do. And I think if you didn't have that, then it wouldn't be much of a game. So it is definitely a game where you're competing, you're playing against the other players. So yeah, to be honest, I liked it a lot more than I expected to. When I read the rules and learned how to play it, I was like, holy cow, this game actually seems like a lot of fun. And it was a blast to play. So generally very positive for me, just a theme that doesn't hit with me. All right, so I think that can wrap up our comments on Smartphone Inc. I almost said Power Grid there on Smartphone Inc. So we'll talk about some things we've been playing and excited about right after this. All right, welcome back. So, Adam, why don't you start? Anything outside of Smartphone Inc. that you've been playing recently or that you're looking at?
Yeah, I've been playing Imperium, the Contention. I've been running through the solo campaign of Imperium, the Contention. So I had this game on a Kickstarter designed by Gary Dworetsky, Contention Games, that's his company. We had him on the show. I forget what episode. Maybe you're checking that out, Tim.
It's a Tapestry episode. I don't remember what number it was, but it was the episode with Tapestry.
Anyway, he was a very fun interview, and his game is fun. He compared it to like a cross between Summoner Wars and Magic the Gathering. I've never played either of those, but this game is a lot of fun. You've got like 5 or 6 decks, 5 or 6 factions. They're pre-constructed decks. You're playing these guys. They all have different little powers that they're good at. You can play up to, I think it's 5 players, 6 players maybe. They say it's optimally designed for 4 players, so it's kind of a 4x light on this grid system of locations. It's pretty neat. It's a fun game. I wouldn't mind trying it with you guys if you're at all interested. And it runs, I don't know, relatively quick. Lots of the actions are kind of simultaneous selection. And then you pick targets and fight it all out and destroy the ships. And then you do it all over again until somebody gets up to, I think it's 8 favor, and they win the round.
What's the solo campaign like? There's a story element to it, and then does some of the mechanisms change per game, or are you just playing against different factions, or how does that work?
Yeah, so there's a story element to it. You get to you choose your faction. Depending on which faction you are, the story kind of branches in different directions. The story element it's kind of neat to read the little writing in there. It's brief little story, so it's kind of choose your own adventure, right? So if you want to do this, go to this section. If you want to do this, go to this section. Okay, if you chose this, now you're going to fight these guys with these ships. There's a whole campaign deck or a solo deck, and it tells you based on what your choice was, okay, the bad guys are going to have these specific cards out of this whole deck. So for instance, if you're going to play against the Terrans, they get the commander, and then they get these 6 different ships. So they get a first ship and a last ship, and then a bunch of stuff in the middle. You shuffle the stuff up in the middle, and then you sandwich that between the first and the last thing. So you know what's coming up first and last, and then the middle stuff you don't know. And then they cycle through the deck over and over again as you get out your ships and plan your strategy, try to take them down. If you win, it says, congrats, you win. You get to pick a card, like a bonus card in most cases, and you get to add that to the next fight that you're in. And if you lose, you can just reset that specific scenario, or you can go back to the beginning and start it all again. So, of course, I was just restarting that specific scenario and, not taking it too seriously and having fun, just exploring the mechanics of the game, and had a lot of fun with it.
Are you finding it a challenge, or is it more about playing through the story?
So one of them was definitely a challenge, and there's ways to increase the challenge that are laid out that are, official variants. If you're getting too good at it, you can try this and this and this. So of course, as I played more and more and more, I found the challenge lesser and lesser and lesser, and that's at the basic, easiest level. And I haven't tried upgrading the challenge level at all. So that's where I'm at with that.
It sounds fun, Adam. Yeah, I think it'd be fun to bust out. We should do a 4-player game of that in October when we're all together. I'd love to see how it plays. If anyone's interested, we did interview Gary Dworetsky, the designer of that game, back on episode 10. So one of our earlier episodes when we talked about Tapestry, but the second half of the episode was just our conversation with Gary. Super nice guy, very passionate about the design of his first game. And Gary Dworetsky actually, from what I understand now, has the license to do a Slay the Spire board game, which I am really excited about because that's one of my favorite non-board game apps that I've been playing for quite a while now. So I'm excited to see what he does with that in a board game mode. So, all right, very cool. Steve, what about you? Have you been playing anything new this week?
Nothing new this week, but I did play a couple of old games this week. I played Catan, Cities and Knights, which I haven't played for a very long time. Had fun with it. I always like Catan.
What's the hook with Cities and Knights? How does that change up the game of Catan?
Yeah, there are barbarians. So every round, in addition to the 2 dice for the resources, there's a die that can either trigger a city bonus, a research bonus, or it makes the barbarians get closer to the towns. Eventually, the barbarians will come. When the barbarians reach land, the barbarian strength is equal to the number of cities that all players have. So there's settlements and then there's cities. So the bigger buildings are the cities. So if there's 5 total cities on the board, then the barbarians have a strength of 5. And you have the opportunity over the course of the game to buy knights and activate them. And they can also be used for other things. So you have to time it correctly. You want to have enough knights to defend against the barbarians if you have any cities that are at risk of being sacked, and especially if you can have the most knights defending the city. Whoever defends the city the best gets a bonus point, or if there's a tie, you get some resources. But if you do not defend the city, your cities get raised down to settlements. There's some fun with that, deciding whether you want to put knights out there or not, depending on your particular situation. There's also another little aspect to it. I said on the barbarian die, if a research icon comes up, you've got these little flip charts there's 3 different types of research. Instead of getting resources from a city like you would in a normal game, most of the cities give you 1 resource and 1 research token. It's called something else. And you collect enough research tokens to upgrade your research levels. And then when that colored research die comes up on the barbarian's die, you get bonuses.
Now, is this an expansion to the base game? Like
Yes.
You have Catan and you just add this. Okay, so I know there's a lot of other Catan versions that are separate boxes, but this is just an expansion to Catan.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Steve, would you typically, if some friend was like, "Hey, I want to play Catan again," would you usually say, "Yeah, let's add the Cities and Knights version"? Or
No.
no?
I like the research component a lot. I don't like messing with the barbarians. It's like just kind of a distraction. It's fine, but I don't particularly enjoy that part of it.
I played the Game of Thrones version of Catan a couple years back. Somebody dragged me into it, and it sounds very similar. Basically, though, you've got like all of the normal tiles are back behind the big wall, and then you can have, I think you've got like defender guys up on the wall. So some of what you're trying to do is build up your power set as the White Walkers are coming closer to the city. Then you can try to protect the city. I remember being really frustrated by that game because I was doing really well, and then the random roll of the White Walkers, they knocked my guy off the tower, and so basically I ended with the most points, but if you didn't have somebody on the tower or something, like, then you couldn't win the game. Oh, that was so frustrating. Like Catan is frustrating enough, and then you got to add that crap in there.
What about you, Tim? You been playing anything new this week, or you got anything on the horizon?
Yeah, the only thing that I didn't play yet, but I did bust it out. I learned the rules. It's sitting up on my table right now to play, and that is the Isle of Cats, which is a game that I've had my eye on for a couple of years since the first Kickstarter launch, but it's been pretty well received. Finally, I saw it on sale. It was when I was buying something else. I just added it to my order, and it looks fun. I learned the rules with it. I got it all set up. I'm ready to play a game, and it just looks like kind of a fun, interesting tile drafting game that uses like polyomino tiles, but the cats are the polyominoes, and you're trying to rescue them from an island. So you're trying to put them on your boat, and the more spaces you fill up, the more points they're worth. And then there's like, bonuses for having multiple cats of the same color connected to each other and things like that. But it's a drafting game. So every round you start with 7 cards and you go around drafting, and the cards are either going to let you rescue cats or they're going to give you end game bonuses for doing certain things. So I'm really excited to try it out. It looks like a lot of fun to me. We'll see how it hits with my local play group here. If it hits, I'm sure we'll play it a lot. And if it doesn't, then I'm sure I'll sell it. So that's, what I just realized lately, I was like looking at my collection, because I've been getting rid of a lot of games that just aren't getting played lately. I'm like, my collection's like half the size it was a month ago. And the thing is, my collection is just getting like more and more light, because I'm just keeping the games that are getting played.
Yeah.
And the 2 people that I play the most with, which is my wife and our friend Jen, they're playing midweight games maybe with me, but not to the same level that I am. So I'm only keeping the games that I absolutely love if they're not getting played, or that I can play solo. In other words, I'm getting rid of all kinds of what are probably really great midweight games that I just don't get to play with anybody. So my collection's getting lighter, and I don't know, it's kind of a sad realization that the collection of games that I play is all based on what other people want to play, not what I want to play.
What are some of the ones you've been getting rid of?
Well, so for example, like I just got rid of Raiders in the North. Well, I haven't gotten rid of them yet. They're in a sell pile. So I got a big pile of games that I'm ready to get rid of. But like Raiders of the North Sea is never going to get played. So that's leaving. I think I'm going to get rid of Red Rising, because that's never going to get played with me. Cubitos, which I liked just fine. I'd like to explore more. My wife doesn't want to play it at all. So that's never going to get played here. So, it's just like there's a handful of solid games. Santa Monica is another one that we played it a couple more times, and she just has no interest, and I don't love it enough to kind of bought it for someone to play with her. But if she doesn't like it, then we're not going to play it. So yeah, it's just my collection's just shrinking in a way I don't love. I don't know. I got to find some local game friends that I can drag into this stuff. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's what we've been playing this week. So I think we can wrap up this episode. By the way, our 1 year anniversary of recording our first episode is in exactly 2 weeks. So you'll have about a week after you hear this. What we'd like to do, we've got some special things planned for our 1 year anniversary episode. But one of the things we'd love to do is that if we get any comments, feedback, or questions from our listeners, we'd love to just, we may chat about them on the episode. So feel free to reach out to us on social media. Give us your thoughts, give us some comments, give us some feedback. Just ask some questions about us, about the hosts, about anything you'd like to. And if we have some time in the episode, we may answer those. You can reach out to us on social media, on Twitter at BG_hot takes, and on Facebook at Board Game Hot Takes. We'd love to hear from you. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.